Brandy, otherwise known as Mystery of Diamonds, and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, hey y'all! Okay, so I've got on the Wolfie nails because I am working on Wolf Captivary from Treasure Studios Art. And we are by Anthony Cristo. I forgot to tell you, this is for the Wolf Along that is happening from Wolfpack. So I'm excited because look, we've got his beautiful eyes. Oh my God, love the eyes. Love them, love them. This is our second Forensic Friday whipping chat. So I hope that y'all enjoyed the first one. So what I figured I would do is before I get started, I would tell you the solution to the first mystery. Now, if you have not listened to the first mystery from Forensic Friday, the very first one, then you might want to go back and watch that one. I will put that up in the eye right here before you hear the solution if you're interested. So, the solution to the first week's mystery, I'll go ahead and tell you there were a few people. So sorry that you are hearing the dogs because they're losing their brain. Give me just a minute. Okay, I'm back. So sorry about that, guys. I've got some dogs. Like I said, my little puppies, they have little heart attacks and they're barking because my husband's moving around. So I apologize for that. Okay, so like I said, there were a few people that actually had the solution correct to the first mystery. So here we go. I'm going to actually read you the solution, and I picked up the wrong paper. So sorry. Okay, so sorry. Okay, so the solution. The murderer was Henry Alfonso, otherwise known as Burt Camford, and the method was poisoning by absorption through the skin. He did it to prevent Stork from showing photos of him and his lover Greta on nationwide television. So the explanation is this. Upon arriving at work this morning and reading today's script, knowing how many criminals had been spotted and captured as a result of this show and fearing the same fate, Henry Alfonso, now known as Burt Camford, rummaged through the flora around the Hollywood Reservoir and discovered some monkshood growing amid the underbrush. He was quite familiar with it, both from the term paper he'd written in college, The Healing and Poisonous Qualities of Common North American Plants, and because it was the same poison native to the Rockies of New Mexico as well as Southern California that he had used to murder his wife. He ground the leaves up into a syrup with the mortar and pestle he always kept in his makeup bag and stirred the syrup into the liquid adhesive he used for Ronald Stork's toupee. It made the glue less sticky so that it didn't hold the toupee on as well, leading Stork to ask for a second application. But monkshood is quickly absorbed through the skin, and it did the trick before Stork completed his report on Alfonso's earlier crime. When Alfonso killed his wife and ran off with his teenage lover, Greta Phillips, 3 years before, both being even more in love with everything theatrical than with each other, they quickly made their way to Hollywood, where they changed their names to Burt Camford and Patty Landers, changed their looks, using Henry's talent for makeup, and got jobs working on television shows. Henry used his theatrical expertise to become a makeup artist, and after a few one-shot jobs on small-time productions, landed the ongoing slot on Unresolved Murders. When the opportunity arose, he got Patty, otherwise known as Greta Phillips, hired on as the show's set-aside caterer. By the time police connected up the TV star's murder with the story he was reading when it happened, Henry and Greta, otherwise known as Burt and Patty, had disappeared again. They're rumored to be acting in a Shakespearean company touring the New Zealand provinces. So if you were one who said that he was poisoned through his wig, and I did have a few of those, you are absolutely correct. So I was really pleased that we had people that had that correct. Because that was a tough one. You know, I had a lot of people thought that it was Teresa, with the juniper berry. But the one thing about that one that you have to keep in mind is that when they did the autopsy, the stomach contents showed that the juniper berry was undigested, which means that he was killed prior to the juniper berry that was in the tea to be digested. So, that was the little clue on that one. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get into the whip and chat portion of this, and I will be doing a voiceover for our next case that we're going to cover. So here we go. Okay, guys, so I figured that today that we would do the case of Ted Bundy. Now, this happens to be a case that is very well known by most people. So, just as a beginning recap, Ted Bundy was executed in 1989. He was a serial killer that was in the 70s. He killed at least 36 women. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about after things that came out after he was killed and all that. So I'm going to kind of start off at the beginning. He was actually born November 24th in 1946, but it was an illegitimate birth, and like, in other words, that mom said that she didn't know who the father was. And it was kind of rumored that it was possible that the father was actually her father, but it was never really proven or anything. So he was actually, because it was an illegitimate birth, the family was like very, I guess you could say, disappointed or ashamed and all that. So what they actually did is they actually raised him as the adopted son of his grandparents, and they told him that his mother was actually his sister. So he kind of grew up thinking that his sister, or, that his mother was his sister. And he did show some really kind of strange signs. About age 3, he showed that he had a fascination with knives, and that he was very smart. He did well in school, but he didn't do well with his peers. Like, he was not very personable with his peers. He was kind of shy and reserved. But then as he got a little bit older, he tended to be a little bit more outspoken. He became more confident. And so as a teenager, though, he was very interested in things that were happening in other people's lives. So he would actually peer in other people's windows, and he was not opposed to stealing things. Now, he did go to college. He actually graduated from the University of Washington, and he had a degree in psychology. Now, keep that in mind. A degree in psychology, y'all. That means that, he knew about, like, the inner workings of minds and ways that he could manipulate people, because that actually does play a part in his story of what happened. Now, the thing is that when he started killing a lot of his victims, because he had a girlfriend in college, and she had long brown hair. She was very attractive. And she broke his heart. She broke up with him, and it kind of messed him up because he was really totally in love with her. So a lot of his victims tended to follow that same look. They were attractive. They had long dark hair. He did eventually, when he was caught, he did confess to 36 people, but people believe that he actually had a lot more out there than what he confessed to. They think it was maybe closer to about 100 or more girls. And he had a lot of the same MO for a lot of his victims. He raped them before he beat them to death. And that's not all of the girls, but a lot of them he did that too. One of the things that he was very famous for doing is that he would pretend that he was injured, and he would get the girls to help him to his car, and that's where he would then abduct them and then take them to kill them. The thing is that Ted Bundy was very, I guess for the time you could say he was very attractive looking. He didn't look like a serial killer. He looked like just a nice, normal person. And, he would have like maybe a cast on his arm, or not really, or a sling, or he had crutches or something to make himself look all innocent and helpless and whatnot. And then, of course, he preyed on the fact that women would be like, oh my gosh, do you need some help? Let me help you. And that's how he ended up getting them. Now, in 1974 in Utah, there was a lot of different women that were going missing around that time, and he actually got pulled over by the cops. And when they looked in his car and they searched his car, they saw that he had what they call like a burglary kit. He had like a crowbar and a face mask, rope, handcuffs. So they actually did arrest him for the stuff in his car. They didn't arrest him for suspicion of murder or anything, but they, did arrest him for having that kind of stuff in his car. Then in 1975, he was actually arrested again for kidnapping a woman named Carol LaRoche. She actually did escape. And for that particular, he got a sentence of 1 to 15 years in prison. But in 1977, now keep in mind, that's only 2 years after he was arrested and given the sentence of 1 to 15 years for kidnapping Carol. He actually escaped. And the thing is that the first time that he escaped, he was indicted on murder of a young Colorado woman. And so he acted as his own defense. Now, let me kind of tell you a little bit about this story. So the thing is that, when he went to college, like I said, he got his degree in psychology. However, he was accepted into law school. So, he actually had been studying the law, and he was very, I guess you could say, arrogant, because he did not believe that there was anybody else. He fired so many of his defense attorneys because, he didn't feel that they had the necessary means to successfully argue his case. So he decided that he was going to be his own counsel, because he was the only one in his brain smart enough to be able to defend him. And so because he was acting as his own counsel, they gave him access to the law library, so that he could look up things to help him with the case. But the thing is that he's indicted for murder, but they didn't pay attention to what he was doing. So they actually would leave him in the law library pretty much on his own. And I mean, like they were supposedly at the door and stuff like that. But he was very personable. And so they had managed to actually get him, where he managed to get them where they were like, oh, okay, well, you look up your stuff. Well, he took that opportunity to actually jump out a window. And now he was captured 8 days, y'all, later. So, there's no telling what kind of stuff happened during that. Now, I will say that there was a point prior to all of this that he worked while he was going to school for psychology, he actually started working at a crisis hotline. And there's a very famous author. Her name is Anne Rule. And she was working with him at the crisis center. Now, how crazy is that? That here's this person, and he's been murdering women, abducting and murdering and raping women, yet he was at a crisis center, and he was answering calls, trying to talk people down off ledge, trying to get people to not kill themselves, not hurt themselves, help them feel better. And, Anne said that he was like just this super nice, wonderful person, amazing personality. And she actually did end up forming a really good friendship with him. And she did stay in contact with him even while he was later on in prison in Florida, which I'll get to in a minute. And so she wrote a book about her relationship. It was one of her first true crime books that she wrote, was called Stranger Beside Me. She's probably one of my all-time favorite true crime story authors, because she has a lot of background knowledge in criminal justice and law and crime reporting. So I've read a lot of her books, and that was one of the first ones that I read was The Stranger Beside Me. That was about Ted Bundy and their friendship. So anyway, he was finally captured after 8 years. Now in December, after they captured him, or sorry, 8 days, not years, 8 days. Whoo, goodness, 8 years. Whoo. But in December, he ended up escaping again. But this time what he did is he lost like about 30 pounds. And he noticed that there was this light above the top bunk in his prison cell. And so he lost weight because he was figuring out how much he would need to be big around to be able to fit up there. And so he had been working on making a hole in the ceiling, and they couldn't really see it because of the light. And so he was able to remove it and escape. And the thing is that they didn't even realize for 15 hours that the man was even missing. And so he left from there after escaping, and he went to Florida. So he came here. I live in Florida. I actually live not too far from where he ended up. So on January 14th, 1978, he broke into the Chi Omega house at Florida State University at FSU. He attacked 4 girls, and he ended up killing 2 of them. February, after he did that, he left, and he was still in Florida, but he left the scene. And on February the 9th, he kidnapped and murdered a 12-year-old girl named Kimberly Leach. Now, that was the only one that they know of anyway, as far as a child that he abducted and killed. We're not exactly sure as to why that one in particular. Like I said, we don't know if there were other kids or anything, because mostly he stayed to the same, I guess you could say, demographic. He tended to stick with those very pretty young ladies with the dark brown hair that reminded him of his ex-girlfriend. But this particular time, he did kidnap and he murdered a 12-year-old little girl. Now, when he got to his trial, because they did capture him, and he actually, once again, he was pulled over in Florida, and they got him. And one of the things that he did, and this was highly, I guess you could say it was controversial at the time a little bit, because it had not been really proven and done a lot prior to this. He had left bite marks on the butt of some of the victims. Like he bit their buttocks. And so he actually fought them tooth and nail when they came to get dental impressions from him. But, obviously they got a court order and they got the bite marks. What they did is they took an impression of his teeth, and then they compared it to the bite marks on the victims, and they matched exactly. This was one of the first times that forensic odontology was used to help link a suspect to victims. And of course, he obviously tried to argue it. He was like, oh, no, But, and then he also got cocky thinking, well, it's a new technique. They're not going to get me on this. But it actually was a huge boon for the prosecution. And it actually was one of the things that was like the coffin in Bundy's nail in the coffin. I don't know why I said coffin in the coffin. Nail in the coffin. Now, something I did not really realize before. I was looking on his biography, and they said that he actually decapitated 12 of his victims. So I think that's kind of like weird. It was an interesting little piece of tidbit that I didn't know. In February of 1980, so, he married a woman named Carol Ann Boone. Now, he did have a girlfriend prior to that when he was, while he was out, and she, before he did the last ones, and then she was still with him when he got arrested in Florida. And then she started realizing that, and let's see, what was her name? Hold on. Her name was Clofer. That was her last name, Clofer. And then she kind of realized that he probably actually really did do it, and she actually did call the police on him. But they didn't look into him at that particular time. It was a little bit later when he was in Florida that he ended up getting caught. But in 1980, he married Carol Ann Boone. And the thing is that he was actually in court during his penalty phase. Y'all, his penalty phase. So therefore, he was being told, this is what you're going to have happen to you. You've been convicted and you're going to prison, and this is what your sentence is going to be. And so the judge was there, and he actually proposed to Carol Ann in front of the judge, and she said yes. And so in front of a judge, by doing that, it actually made it a legitimate marriage in Florida at that time. I don't know if that's still the case here. I don't know if that's still in this time and day, but yeah. And then in 1982, Boone gave birth to a daughter named Rose. She said that Bundy was the father. We're not 100% sure. We don't actually know a whole lot about Rose. So, that would be, wow, could you imagine, if you found out that, Ted Bundy was your father? Woo, that would, Now, Boone did end up divorcing him 3 years before his execution because, obviously when he was in the penalty phase, they told him, here in Florida, it's kind of like in Texas where, the death penalty is on the table. Now, at the time, they used the electric chair. They nicknamed it Old Sparky. So on January 24th of 1989 at 7 o'clock in the morning a.m., he was electrocuted by Old Sparky. There was a lot of people that were cheering and happy and out in the parking lot and whatnot. He ended up getting cremated in Gainesville, but there wasn't any kind of public ceremony or anything. So there's some interesting, I've got some, I guess you could say, TV series, movies, and books that if you're more interested in the Ted Bundy case, because like I said, there is so much that we have found out about Ted Bundy. And things that even he has said himself that you can actually see. So there was a TV movie with Mark Harmon that played Bundy, and it was called The Deliberate Stranger. And then, of course, the most recent movie was called Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile. It came out in 2019. The Deliberate Stranger had come out in 1986, but this one came out in 2019, and it starred Zac Efron as Bundy. Now, the really cool thing about that one, and I actually have seen it and I like it, is that Zac Efron really did study some of the confession tapes and the video that we have of Ted Bundy, and he really took on those mannerisms, and he did a very good job. If I'm correct, that's on Netflix. I'm not 100% positive, but I'm pretty sure it's on Netflix because I remember watching it. And then there was a documentary that came out, I think also on Netflix, called Conversations with a Killer, the Ted Bundy tapes. And a lot of those are some of the same ones with some of the same scenes that you'll see in that movie with Zac Efron. But it's actually Ted Bundy, and there's these different clips and stuff. Because like I said, the entire time through the trial and everything, that's why he fired so many of his defense attorneys and took it on himself, is because he was so cocky and so arrogant and so confident of himself that like nobody's going to catch him. He's not going to get convicted. But even when he did and he was asked, he would still only confess to the 36, and he wouldn't confess to any others, even though we believe that there's more. And there have been a couple of books written about him, as I talked about earlier. Anne Rule, which if you are interested in true crime series, you really need to check out some of her books. Like I said, one of the first ones that I read, which is one of the first ones that she wrote, was The Stranger Beside Me. She goes all into personal things that she knew about Bundy from when she worked with him at the Crisis Hotline. There's another one that was written by that ex-girlfriend, Plouffer, the one that he was dating even when he, before he got arrested and then when he finally got arrested in Florida. And it's called The Phantom Prince, My Life with Ted Bundy. She goes into, and I have not read that one, but she goes into her life that she lived with Ted Bundy. Then there is one by Stephen Machad. I probably said that wrong. And Hugh Ainsworth called Ted Bundy Conversations with a Killer. There's another one by Polly Nelson called Defending the Devil, My Story as Ted Bundy's Last Lawyer. And then the last one that I have is by Rhonda Stapley called I Survived Ted Bundy, The Attack, Escape, and PTSD That Changed My Life. This was one of the women in 1974 that was attacked by Ted Bundy and escaped. So, if you're interested at all in hearing any more about the Ted Bundy case, more in-depth information, then by all means, you can check out any of these books or the movies. I would highly, highly recommend the one with Zac Efron, which again was extremely wicked, shockingly evil, and vile. They did a really good job of capturing the entire case. You see the whole background and everything. It's really cool. Okay, so are you guys ready for our next mystery? I hope so. Okay, I will try to read slower because I know that I got super excited last time and I read a little bit faster. I'm so sorry for that. So here we go. This one is called Corpulent Corpse. Donna Livingston, Esquire, rushed into Detective Tubert's office like a charging bull. I know, I'm late. She plopped herself on his torn leather chair. Elaine Dutton was an hour late dropping the letter off at my office. Some sort of evening gown emergency. She's a seamstress, Donna Livingston, I presume? Gosh, I never heard that one before. Tubert felt foolish as she pulled an envelope from her purse. It's been a year since their father's death, said Tubert. Why did it take so long for this letter to surface? The day Faustus Dutton died, his 3 kids started fighting over how to split up his autograph collection, which is probably worth about $25 million. Mepham whistled. Whew! What'd he have, a posthumous Elvis? A love letter from George Washington to Martha, an original Beethoven score, an alleged Shakespeare poem, a smattering of kings and czars, that sort of thing, Mepham whistled again. One of them wants to sell the collection immediately, she continued. Another insists it'll double in value if they hold on to it for a few years. And the third one doesn't want to sell it at all. And of course, they've got favorites that they want to keep as mementos. Well, as the executor, I've been trying to work out a solution ever since. In the meantime, they decided to padlock his room and give me the key for safekeeping to make sure none of them could slip out anything of the collection until the matters are settled. So yesterday they finally came to an agreement. When we opened the room to retrieve the collection, I found this letter in his desk. Tubert pulled the folded page from its envelope. To whom it may concern, it began in a jagged scrawl. In the event of my death, I, Faustus Dutton, hereby formally request a police investigation. The reason for this is simple. I know that one of my children murdered me. Tubert looked up. You think this is true? His kids do. They just don't know which one of them did it. So they asked me to turn the matter over to the police. After a year, Tubert knew the trail would be colder than an Eskimo's soul, but the dead man's plea intrigued him. I guess we'll have to exhume the body. Tubert lifted the heavy bronze knocker on the massive oak door and let it drop. Donna answered, Welcome to Dutton Manor. She waved him into an enormous foyer and led him into a 2-story library where he found 2 men and a woman waiting. Lieutenant Tubert, allow me to introduce my clients, she said. Sam, Jack, and Elaine. Tubert made the rounds to shake hands, noting that the siblings were sitting as far from each other as possible. There was no love lost in this family. We are so pleased that you decided to dig up the body, said Elaine. I know Daddy's letter was bizarre, and the police are so busy. Cut the crap, Elaine, Jack said impatiently. No need to get snippy, she chided. Sam interrupted. Can we just get on with it? Tubert was only too happy to. I called this meeting because the autopsy results came back last night and confirmed your father's fears. He was murdered. The three siblings exchanged glances. The body was significantly decomposed, Tubert continued, but they're still able to find evidence of succinylcholine. Sucky what? Asked Donna. It's like a synthetic curator, said Sam. Paralyzes the muscles. We use it in anesthesia. Sam's an ICU nurse, said Elaine. Which makes Sam the only one with access to the stuff. Eh, nursey? Jack snickered. It's not a controlled substance like narcotics are, interjected Tubert. Someone motivated enough to commit murder wouldn't have much trouble lifting the stuff from a hospital. Sam pounced on this, especially someone with a history of shoplifting like Jack. I was a teenager, for Christ's sake. Hey, I hate to interrupt the love fest, said Tubert, but I'd like to see where your father died. They mounted the stairs to the 4th floor. This was Faustus's bedroom, said Donna. It's been locked since the police broke in, except for when we came in to get the collection and found the letter. She took a key out of her purse and unlocked a massive padlock that sealed the room. As she swung open the door, she said, They found him in bed, on his back. It looked just like a heart attack. He had a history of angina. Tubert surveyed the room. It was octagonal in shape, with windows looking out in all directions, not only locked, but double bolted. He checked for signs of tampering on the windows. He rummaged through the bedside drawers. He knelt and examined the bed, lifting the sheets to check the mattress. He looked through the dresser and the closet. He stood on a chair to check the swag lamp hanging over the bed. Nothing unusual anywhere. Turning to examine the door, Tubert saw 3 arrays of splintered holes in the door jamb. There used to be 3 deadbolts there, explained Donna. Now, the police had to use a battering ram to get in. Daddy locked himself in every night, said Elaine. Bugger didn't even trust his own kids, Jack muttered. Well, he apparently had good reason, remarked Tubert. What was it? Money? What else? Said Jack. Elaine explained. The Friday before he died, Daddy told us he was going to Donna's office on Monday to give his entire autographed collection to the Smithsonian. We all knew he'd been thinking about it, added Sam, but this was the first time he'd actually told us he was going to do it. Jack scowled bitterly. Just like the old weasel to tell us before he did it so he could watch us beg for our inheritance. So, someone tried to stop him by slipping the poison into his food that weekend? Donna asked. Tubert shook his head. I'm afraid not. Succinylcholine is poorly absorbed in the intestines. Someone had to inject it. Depending on the dose, death could have occurred within seconds. But that's impossible, said Denny. How could someone have come into the room? How could someone have done that if the room was securely locked from the inside? That's the question, isn't it? Replied Tubert. But I'm pretty sure I know who did it and how. And a simple search will prove it. So who do you think killed Faustus Dutton? How do you think it was done? What was it about the killer that gave him or her away? So here's a few clues. The housekeeper's statement. They all live here together, you know, like a bunch of inmates at some kind of institution, fighting and swearing. The old man throw open the door every morning and come down to the library where he'd take his coffee. Then onto the veranda for lunch, rain or shine, and he'd sit in the rocker and fall off sleeping during the afternoons. Supper in the dining room, then off to bed by 9 when he'd lock himself in again. The attending nurse's statement. The following statement was taken from Miss Annette Jones, duty nurse when the victim was hospitalized for an angioplasty 2 weeks before his murder. I wasn't surprised that he'd have heart problems. He weighed close to 300 pounds. And there was so much stress in that family. I mean, his 3 grown children just fought all night like little kids. The waiting room was next to the nurse's station, and they got so loud that we couldn't stand it. We spent the night doing rounds instead of hanging out at the desk, just coming back when a patient needed drugs or something. We've got a closet behind the station where we keep all the drugs for surgery and recovery. And from the forensics report, the fact that the victim was apparently unable to rise from bed to summon help indicates that a large dose of the toxin was administered. However, the body was too decomposed to determine into which part of the body the injection was delivered. So, that is the case. So I wonder, I'm tasking you with the task, do you think you know which of his 3 kids killed him? Do you know how they killed him? Think of all the clues, and if you need to, go back and listen to it again. I hope that I read it slow enough for you. So I'm going to go ahead and turn you over to the end of the video. Okay, so this is where I'm going to leave you. All I've got left actually is just one color. Okay, so I really hope that you enjoyed hearing, if you haven't heard about the case about Ted Bundy, I really hope that you enjoyed hearing about what all happened, and I hope that you enjoyed this week's mystery. So remember, if you are interested in solving that mystery, put your comments down below. Who do you think did it? Who do you think was the guilty party? I always love being able to see what y'all come up with for who you think did it, because that is so cool to me. And so remember, I hope that you like this video, and if you do, hit that thumbs up button down below. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, I would love for you to subscribe and become part of the Diamonds family. Come on down and join us. So, but just make sure that you hit that bell. I can't even see how it's directed. Hit that bell notification for all notifications so that you know whenever I upload a video and whenever I go live. I usually go live on Mondays at 7 o'clock Central Time. And so I hope that you'll come and join me. So I'm going to leave you like I always do. Reach for the stars, grab hold, hold on, and never let go. Until my next video, bye guys.